So we're going to do it much the same as the last panel. Hopefully, I'll just sit here and you guys can just communicate with each other. If I have to intervene, something's going wrong. But I'm sure you guys can do this. So I'm from British Columbia, so I should have no say in this panel whatsoever. But, however, I was speaking with Keith Wilson. We all know who he is recently. I had him on the podcast, and after I asked him, as someone from British Columbia who supports Alberta sovereignty, I see it as a liberty movement. This is how I view it. So I want to lend all the support I can to this, even though I don't have any skin in the game. And I asked him about that, and he said, that's the most sincere way to support Alberta sovereignty. It's because you don't have any skin in the game. You want to just see people do well. And this is what I see from an outside perspective. I want to see Alberta do well, because if Alberta does well independently, then maybe in the future British Columbia can, maybe Saskatchewan can, maybe Quebec can, maybe other places can. Maybe we can be great neighbors instead of terrible business partners. So I think I'll start it off from there. I'll set the stage with you, Bruce, and then we'll go down and then open the discussion.
Why don't you let the Albertans speak first?
Oh, yeah, great point. You're on the same boat as me. So we'll start here. Thank you very much.
So how can we become better business partners? Well, unfortunately, I don't think there's any appetite out there for anybody to do business with Alberta. So we're in a situation right now where we're seeing that our premier has given the federal government a bunch of motives, or a bunch of questions that she would like answered and approved, and we're 6-7 weeks down from that process, and he came out with 6 major announcements, and none of them have anything to do with Alberta. In spite of the fact that we're possibly the economic driver from the whole country. As a matter of fact, it's worse than that. What they're trying to do is not only not give us more projects, they're trying to cut the projects that we have down. So our biggest problem is a very, very corrupt government up at the top that is very busy filling their pockets with Alberta money. I know that sounds awful, but it's absolutely the truth. And we understand from going down this path, as long as we've been going down this path, that Albertans did not elect kings, and that as a consequence to that, these people are breaking the law on a regular basis with no consequence. And unless that very thing gets fixed, how can we negotiate with Ottawa?
Well, speaking further to our neighbors, whether it's Ontario, Quebec, or BC, the system is screwing everybody. It's just Alberta is the one that's on the brink of independence because of it. And I think actually as independence proponents and supporters, we should be reminding people if we can break down the system, it's going to benefit everybody. We're not trying to make Alberta independent to hurt Ontario or to hurt BC. We're doing it to benefit Alberta. But by the same token, Canada as a whole will be better once that whole agreement is redrafted, whichever way it may be, whether it's independent nations or a whole new deal or whatever it is. But if we can keep that tone, it's not spite, it's just accepting that we won't take this agreement any longer within Alberta, but that can benefit the people on either side of us. And actually, as you said, you can be supportive of where our goal is going, as a good friend, even if it isn't directly impacting you. But Alberta's independence is going to impact the entire country, and in the long run, it will be for the better.
I just add this, when you evaluate economic growth of all industrialized countries in the world, and Canada is dead last, it has to tell you something with respect to the way in which the federal government has compromised business, not just in Alberta, but around the country as well. And so their pet projects get approved, and other projects that have massive economic benefit for the country don't get approved. So for example, and this is not just in oil and gas, in the last several years, and the Premier has said this, and the Canadian Taxpayer Federation has stated this as well, is that over $500 billion of planned investment in Alberta didn't take place. Why? Because those investors couldn't see a business case. Why? Because of federal regulation and taxation. And through, and when you think about it, had that investment taken place through the multiplier effect, it would have increased the economic activity throughout the rest of the country. It would have benefited everybody. So the concept of Alberta independence, dealing with other regions in the country who are also independent, in our opinion, from the perspective of the Alberta Prosperity Project, would create far more collaboration and cooperation with respect to business generation in each of those particular regions. Is it possible to do it in the current construct of our federation? No. Is it possible to do it in a massive devolution of power from the federal government to the provinces? Yes. But is it possible to achieve that objective? No. Not without Alberta or Quebec at least becoming sovereign and forcing those kinds of changes to occur.
My biggest fear for Alberta is that it will manage to separate and will make itself into a little Canada. It will manage to leave Ottawa behind, but it will keep all the Canada that it now has inside Alberta. In order to really turn the page here, to become not just an independent country, but a new and free country, Alberta has to ditch the things that are Canadian that exist in Alberta right now. Let's just list them. A Westminster system of government, a crown, a single-payer public health care system, a managerial state, and Aboriginal rights. You have to get rid of all of these things. And of all of those things, perhaps the elephant in the room is Aboriginal rights. Because, as I have argued, if you really want a free country governed by a rule of law, one of the features of that idea is that the same laws and rights and rules apply to everybody. And so, in response to those Albertans who want things to sort of look the way they are, you've got to try to persuade them that that is not the project. You are trying to establish not just freedom from Ottawa, but freedom from the system that right now has you under its thumb.
So we're proposing a definite change, and we're going to have a constitution come out at the end of the month. And this constitution is going to be a discussion paper for all Albertans and basically all Canadians. The last thing we want is the Westminster system repeated. The Westminster system is an honor system, and we clearly see that the federal government has no honor. There's absolutely no honor there at all. So we also see from listening to the conversation here all day that the crimes that they've put on our people, starting early this morning with the medical discussion, are stuff that most Albertans do not even want to discuss. However, the leading cause of death in Alberta is still unknown causes. And then the other thing that they're throwing on us is everything else that they're doing with the information and everything else. So we have the opportunity here, and I've always said this, when Klaus Schwab, there should be a great reset, I've always thought we would have the opportunity to do it the other way, so that we could absolutely make Alberta the best, freest, safest place in the world for conservatives and people that think like us to live. So that's the goal.
Well, yeah, and I just want to reiterate a little along with what Bruce was talking about, the opportunity that's coming to have a blank slate, to look around the world, to look at the modern systems, what's been working, what hasn't been working, what might we want to apply, and of course, what's most important, what we might shed. And there is a hazard, there is a risk. We all know that person who gets out of a terrible relationship they complained and cursed about for 10 years, it was nothing but abusive, and 2 months later they're with another partner who's just like the last one. if you're going to leave a relationship, you've got to have a completely new relationship when you go into it. And our instinct does bring us back to the comfortable, to what we think it's supposed to be, the way that things are supposed to be lined up. This mental thing that we should have some sort of race-based policy for Indigenous people. Race-based policy is always wrong. That's one of the biggest mistakes Canada's made for decades, and look how poorly it's serving them. So we have an opportunity, we have to discuss it, and that's what we're doing now, and I'm optimistic, I'm thrilled, and I like that attitude. Make sure the start is a fresh one, and we just don't repeat mistakes and make a smaller version of what we just got out of.
I want to acknowledge, as Bruce pointed out, the elephant in the room. And the elephant in the room is the issue of Aboriginal rights. And I totally agree that there needs to be one justice system for everybody. No question about that. There is a pragmatic aspect here, and that is that the way the federal government has treated Aboriginal people is it has resulted in a culture of independence. And it's very difficult to get out from under that culture of independence that currently exists. What we would like to see, and we've talked about this with respect to the Alberta Prosperity Project and the Value of Freedom document and what we consider, and we don't always agree on everything, but there needs to be a transition process to get those people who are Aboriginal out of poverty. At that point, if you think about it from the perspective of non-Aboriginal people who might be concerned that there's a different tax structure for some people who are not being taxed, some Aboriginal people not being taxed, well, within a couple of years of Alberta sovereignty, there will be no federal income tax, and there will be no provincial income tax either. So there would be economic parity there. There's justice parity as well. But I'd be interested, Bruce, in your comment about treaty rights, though. But remove the idea of, because we can solve the problem of economic parity just by what I said, by getting rid of taxation, and we can solve the problem of justice parity by having the same justice system. But what would your comment be about any other treaty rights that might be relevant in this discussion?
Yeah, right. Good question. My take on treaty rights is this. There are no treaty rights in a new Alberta. Here's why. The idea of a treaty is that at some point in the past, two distinct groups of people came together and made some kind of arrangement. Okay. But that was hundreds of years ago. And those two distinct groups of people are no longer distinct. Today, everybody is a mixture of something. And to have the law continue the myth that it is possible and proper for the law to distinguish between people on the basis of their lineage is a huge mistake and contrary and inconsistent with the idea of having a system based upon blind justice. Now, I agree that there needs to be some kind of transition. Now, with respect to the core idea about whether there's going to be different rights for different people, my take on that is, no, sorry, cold turkey. That ends on day 2. But for a transition, my suggestion has been this. Those Aboriginal groups that have reserves, and here's the thing about reserves, and for that matter, Aboriginal title. It's a form of Aboriginal property, except that Aboriginal rank and file don't own that property. This is one of the ways in which the prevailing system acts to the detriment of the individual Aboriginal people in this province and elsewhere in Canada. This special status that they have actually acts to their detriment. So we have to end that as fast as possible, but the transition is this. You take the reserves and you give to each individual who belongs to that group title over a plot of land in that reserve. then it's theirs. It's their property to do with as property is for everybody else. And that is the end of it. From then on, everybody is just an individual citizen.
Let me add something to what you just said, Bruce, because, you know, as you know, David Lametti said, and you know this, that we don't have the right to own property. But the fiscal capacity surplus of a sovereign Alberta, at some point, and it wouldn't be that many years down the line, we would also be able to eliminate property tax. When you eliminate property tax, then you finally will own your property.
So I'm happy you brought up the fact that there's going to be a transition period, because I really don't see it happening that way very quickly, because, of course, my demographic is I live right in the middle of 7 or 8 Aboriginal reserves. So what I'm saying to you is that there is a contract between them and us, and it would be really nice for everybody, them included, to settle that in some way, shape, or form. I totally agree with that. And I think they would be amenable to that. But that's going to require discussion, and that's going to be required as part of the Clarity Act after we get to vote to secede from Confederation. And that's going to be the most important thing that we have to do, is we have to secede first, and then those discussions can take place. That would make all Albertans happy. I don't think it's our goal to leave anybody behind, but I also agree with you that everybody should be treated equally. That would be the best system for all of us.
Well, okay, and the but is this. What I'm trying to say is there is no them and us. There is no them and us. We are all people, individual people, to be treated by the same law. I'm afraid, I fear for this. If you go down the road of trying to reconcile the relationship based upon the idea of them and us, then we are going to continue down the road that we are already on. You've got to make a hard stop to the central idea, which is they are them and we are us, and then we are different, and they belong to them because of who their parents are, and what genes they carry, and what history they associate with. This is an old idea, and it is the heart of the problem. You get rid of that idea first, and then you transition, is my take. You give property rights, but after that, you carry on and you insist upon the central idea that a system of law in a free country refuses to acknowledge differences based upon lineage.
And I do want to say further that there's things that will have to be resolved, but that hazard, and the worst thing we can do if we're talking about building a whole new system, a whole new constitution, is to entrench them and us into a constitution as we have today. That does not belong in a constitution. The only thing I want to see in a constitution are citizens. That's it. Every citizen is the same. Every citizen has the rights. We don't have enough rights for our citizens as it is. In a sense, when we start parsing and splitting within a constitution, we are right back to where we were, and we're going to have more generations of conflict, more generations of problems. We won't have resolution, and we're going to be fighting this, or our grandchildren are going to be fighting this, because we haven't resolved what we messed up 200 years ago. We started it again. So when we draft the new constitution, and we must protect everybody's rights, including Indigenous people's rights, but it means not having any distinguishment within our Constitution between different peoples. It has to be simply citizens.
So it's an interesting discussion right now, because this is also a court consideration. We're right now, as many of you know, we have posed from the perspective of the Alberta Prosperity Project a petition question, which would be pretty much the same as a referendum question. The question that we posed is, do you agree that Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? So that question was submitted to Elections Alberta, And Elections Alberta has referred it to the court because the Citizens Initiative Act required that any constitutional question be compliant with Section 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution, which primarily deals with, and what we're seeing play out in the court, is the question of Aboriginal rights. What do you think?
I think you are completely correct. So let's just examine this for a minute. The court process is as Dennis describes it. Here's the problem. It looks like the referendum process has been rigged. And here's how. There is a section in the Citizen Initiative Act that says, just as you've described, that the question cannot contradict or be inconsistent with the Charter and Aboriginal rights. What that means is you are not allowed to have a referendum in which you seek to change the Charter or Aboriginal rights. In other words, you are not allowed to choose the future of this new country for yourself. They have already tied your hands. Now, here's the kicker. That's the Citizen Initiative Act. There is also a provision in the Referendum Act, a referendum that the government itself would bring forward, which they haven't done yet. But there's a section in that act that says similarly that nothing will touch Aboriginal rights. In other words, on both counts, in both statutes, the Alberta government now, not Ottawa, this has nothing to do with Ottawa, this is the Alberta government in Alberta statutes. They are telling you that you are not allowed to choose a future that does not include the Canadian system of Aboriginal rights.
Well, part of that as well, and that problem within the interpretation and what's constitutionally entrenched is the abuse of the word consult, which has now been changed to consent, implicitly. And that's not the intent, and that's not what it means, and we have to reassert that. And I can't think of a better consultation than a referendum that includes them voting like any other citizen. There's their chance to give consent or not, but we consulted. And I understand the courts won't give the same interpretation that I do, but that's just the kind of quagmire and self-handcuffing we're talking about. One way or another, we have to work out of that sort of confinement constitutionally, or we are spinning our wheels.
So the Aboriginal issue doesn't have to be settled until after we win the referendum for independence. And I agree with Bruce about the fact that the Citizens Initiative Act has totally lost the spirit of it by them allowing a judge to intervene at all. So the Citizens Initiative Act is originally designed for us to bring questions to the people so that they can answer the questions that government is afraid to ask, basically. So in order for us to get to the step where we have to get to negotiation with Aboriginal people is we have to win the referendum for independence first. So just understand that there's a step before the next step. And I'm personally of the opinion that we don't have to ask their permission if they refuse us to have a referendum. We'll do it on our own. And I'll bet you we could do that. So we're going to wait until the court process gets done. And then we're going to see how they're going to tell us that asking a constitutional question could possibly be against the Constitution. And then when they do that, if they rule in our favor, then the next step for us is going to be to get signatures, 177,000 signatures, and then a referendum will be triggered. At that point, and then after that point, there is a negotiation part of the Clarity Act that says that we will negotiate with Aboriginal people and the Government of Canada. I think that that is going to be the process that we have to use. Now, we're going to have to also have a settlement, and there's going to be a process involved because day two, after we win this referendum, and I really believe we can, is going to be something that we're going to have to be very planned out and very careful about, and something that's stressing me from the very beginning of this, and I'm sure that we'll be ready when it comes to time. However, we need to take the step first and have the referendum and win the referendum before we have to worry about all these other things. Not that I don't think that they're important, but I think the second step doesn't happen without the first one.
I am inclined the same way. But I do have a concern, and that is that the path after the referendum is already being laid out. And without a conversation about those things now, that path is going to be the default. And that path is being laid out in various places. Number one is the court process itself and the statute. As we've just said, the statute and the court process are proceeding on the assumption that there are some things that you are not allowed to seek in a new Alberta, including the disruption of the Canadian system of Aboriginal rights. But it's not the only one. I mean, you have a document yourself. The APP has a document laying out what the plan is for Aboriginal rights to, I'm not sure if it would be fair to say enhance the rights, but enhance the holdings by group identity. I mean, Dennis, I take your point about the taxes, and I hope that is the future. I think that is a good possibility. But I would like to be more ambitious for Alberta. Instead of looking to a future in which you don't have to pay income taxes, and maybe you don't have to pay property taxes, think of a country that is governed by a state that is not allowed to take taxes from you. No taxes. That requires a rethink. It means a different kind of system than we have now, but this is the clear table that Corey is talking about. You're looking for a fresh start, to start again and think from scratch. Don't take too much for granted. Start from zero.
I think you're absolutely right, Bruce, and I think we can start from zero. I like the idea of, government has no power, it has no control except for. And under those circumstances, I think we can marry a lot of what you have stated, and I thank you for sending your Constitution proposal to us, and we're going to see what we can do to incorporate some of those ideas. But the beauty of what you've said is it really permits us to be sitting down with other interested parties at a constitutional conference and talk about what that new constitution is going to look like. And I think what we can do is be extremely persuasive with First Nations by giving them the opportunity to transition to freedom. And they will understand freedom because they're under the thumb of the federal government right now. So I think this is a unique opportunity for them.
Here's the
to
challenge.
achieve your objective.
I agree with that. But here's the challenge. So there are two very different kinds of negotiations that might take place. Here's the dangerous one. The negotiation that might take place with respect to the new Alberta negotiating with Aboriginal leaders. Because Aboriginal leaders are the ones with the stakes in the system that exists. The rank and file Indigenous people do not benefit from this system. They don't get the money in their hands. They're the ones who are going to agree that this system has to change. If we can negotiate with them directly to those people that we call Indigenous and say, what do you want? Don't you just want to be a citizen, like Corey says, a citizen of the new country with the same rights as everybody else? Let's negotiate that with them directly. That might work.
Well, that's what we're doing with regular Albertans anyway.
Right.
We're taking the top off and we're negotiating with regular Albertans. So why can't we extend that to them?
100%.
Good. And I'm 100% amenable with that.
Yeah, and again, the most empowering thing we can have is a referendum. And, kind of tying it back to that, there are 100 what-abouts and what-ifs, 1,000 what-abouts and what-ifs to cover. But we do know the path there is that true form of consultation, getting that vote into the hands of Albertans on a clear question. And I think we're closer to that than we've ever been in the history of Alberta within Canada. So, I'm still thrilled and optimistic with where the APP has been taking things and where things are going right now.
So from my perspective, we do town halls almost every night. We do town halls 4 or 5 times a week. We've been all over Alberta. We talk to Albertans everywhere. From my perspective, this is a very winnable thing. As a matter of fact, I'm almost sure, like Dennis said in his presentation, that if it's not very winnable, it's very, very close at this point, and that's before we start campaigning. So I'm afraid that what's going on right now is they're trying to do exactly like Bruce says and deny us the process. So we'll see in the middle of November if they will or they will not deny us the process, in spite of what they say that they're on our side of this, because there's so much at stake here to lose for Alberta. There's absolutely no question in my mind that Alberta will be much better off on its own than under the thumb of Ottawa. So we have to make sure that we keep our focus on the ball and have a look at exactly what we need to do and make sure that we push that government that we have in power right now that is largely people, everybody in this room, I believe, is a conservative. So what we need to do is we absolutely have to make sure that our representative officials understand that if they do not allow us to do this after promising us a path, that we will hold them to account on it. So that's the next step. But I believe we have the opportunity to do this, but we have to take ownership of it ourselves and make sure that everybody works as hard as we do to get this done, because it will be worth it.
I'll tell you a cute story. When Mitch had his leadership dinner in Bonnyville earlier this year, Daniel Smith was sitting between the two of us. And this was just after we had come back from, I think it was before or after we came back from Washington, I can't remember.
Slightly after.
Yeah. And so I said to her, I said, so how do you feel about the prospect of becoming the the president or the prime minister of the sovereign country of Alberta? And she threw her head back and giggled, and she wouldn't answer the question. And I said to her, you realize that following a successful referendum on sovereignty, it is very likely the U.S. will acknowledge Alberta's sovereignty that day. You'll probably get a call from the president or the head of state, and she just listened. But you know, many of us have questions about where does she really stand. Well, one of the good things that she did is she did lower the threshold from 600,000 to 177,000. But then there's this issue in the Citizens Initiative Act. So it's hard to figure out exactly where she's at. If I could predict what I would like to see happen, I'd like to see at some point that she has proven to the citizens of Alberta that we just can't negotiate anything to benefit Albertans with the federal government, and she can finally then say to the Alberta citizens, look, we failed. We cannot negotiate. We have only one path forward, at which point she gets on the independence train and she helps to lead the movement.
And let's not lose sight of the big picture, folks. We started at the beginning saying that this is one way for Alberta to save Canada, and that is true. You disrupt this country because that's the only way this country is going to find the way to confront its fundamental problems. But that's not all. I mean, Alberta could save Western civilization itself. We all know that Western civilization is unraveling. Who else is going to do this? You can reinvent yourself to show the world what Western civilization is supposed to be and how it's supposed to work. Who else but you is going to do this?
You remind me, we got a video from Jim Ferguson from Scotland. He started an organization called Freedom Train International. And he has made the point that freedom lovers around the world are watching what happens in Alberta, and they're praying that we will be successful because they know if we're successful, just as Bruce said, it will definitely show them the pathway, the hope for the future, that they can achieve sovereignty as well. So what we're doing here will impact the world. And I must say what Mr. Trump is doing in the United States as well is helping a lot also.
So I'm going to ask everybody in the room, please work hard. Please understand that this is a unique opportunity for us that we will never get again. We are absolutely all in. What it's going to take is for you to talk to your friends, your neighbors, your family, and talk to everybody and be disciples of the project. And in that way, we will win this. I'm convinced we will win this. All the facts are on our side. This is totally nonpartisan. This is totally about you and your family and your grandkids. And thank you very much for everything that you're doing for us in advance.
Well, that concludes our time. So a big thanks to all of the members here. They gave us a very good vision of the future and a shining beacon in the Western world of liberty. I'd like to thank all of you, Bruce Party, Mitch Sylvester, Corey Morgan, and Dr. Dennis Modry. Thank you so much.